I'm going to read you one of New Apologetics' Easter poems. It's under the heading 5 Easter Poems. We posted it last year, and it's a series of 5. They're all fairly short, and I'm going to go through them one by one and explain them. Poem 1. Am I the only one aware of death? Icy fingers of it wrapped in our affairs, in jokes, in stories, in seeming small matters, the dropping of an ice cream cone, the loss of a beloved toy, the realization that it itself is real, as if it were normal, as if it were expected. But nothing in me expects it, though I should dread it, nor believes truly that it will happen at all. Ah, for the grace to know that death is not what I expect. So this is a poem that's talking about a person realizing the gravity of our situation here on earth. When it says, am I the only one aware of death? It's speaking to the widespread, not pretending that death isn't real, but the non-acknowledgement. Especially, I think, in the Western cultures, as we've developed, death is not something that we see as real anymore. And we've dealt with it in so many different ways. You know, back in the old days, we'd have, children's books with pictures of skulls and saying about, people dying. And even that is almost an evasion of the real, genuine horror that death is. And there's little death, there's reminders of it everywhere. So the next line, icy fingers of it wrapped in our affairs, in jokes, in stories, in seeming small matters. All of these are things that we experience on a daily basis, joking about people getting hurt, joking about death, ways to die, famous last words. All of these things are a coping mechanism, one could say, a way of dealing with death that is not necessarily able to see it head on. And it's not even necessarily a good and healthy thing to see it head on all the time. We would be driven crazy. But it's real. And so the experience of the narrator, shall we say, of this poem is of having this horror sort of strike them and being appropriately horrified at it in all of its forms, at death in all of its forms. Seeming small matters, the dropping of an ice cream cone, the loss of a beloved toy, the very realization that it itself is real. Not all of us know that death is real, and that often continues until someone who's very close to us dies. And we all thought that we knew. We thought we knew what it meant for a person to die until it happened. And then it's crushing. It's crushing that all of them, everything that made them themselves, it's gone. And the same will happen to each of us. As if it were normal, as if it were expected. Treating death as a part of life is something that we do almost by necessity. For many cultures, it is a way of life. It's just a fact that people are always getting sick and dying in places where there isn't adequate medical care. It's especially potent of an issue. It's poignant. It's there. It can be seen as a natural part of life, the natural cycle of birth and death, but it's not. According to Catholic teaching, according to the scriptures, death was not something that human beings were meant to go through. It's not how God made us. He didn't make us to die physically. He didn't make us to die at all. We were supposed to be immune to this phenomenon of death. So it is foreign to us. It is a horror, as if it were expected. It's not expected. Next line, but nothing in me expects it, though I should dread it, nor believes truly that it will happen at all. So even though we might fear death, we might be afraid of those we love getting sick or dying, it's also not something we can comprehend. We don't actually realize, usually until we have some kind of a debilitating condition, that we are in fact mortal, that we are going to die. It's not something that we should have to know. So what this line of the poem is saying is, nothing in me expects it. It's not something that naturally comes to me. So often you hear of older people, shaking their heads and clicking their tongues at how, young people think they're invincible. Why wouldn't they? They're meant to be. And it takes some kind of sickness, some kind of dramatic reminder of mortality to get us to that point where we say, oh my goodness, it really is true. This is really reality. I am mortal. I am weak. I'm going to die. And then the last line, for the grace to know that death is not what I expect. And this last line can be interpreted a number of ways. For one, it can mean just what we were talking about, that death is not what I expect. To know that. To know, no, we weren't meant to die. No, we were meant for something other than this decay. That in itself can be a grace. To say, there's a reason for me thinking in my youth that I'm invincible. There's a reason for me having this horror of death. It's appropriate. Death is not what I'm expecting, not what I expect. The next way it can be understood is death is not what I expect. So on the second tier, we're expecting to die, and death is not, it's a surprise, because of what Jesus has come and done. He's transformed death. He's transformed death to be his own death, which is really an entrance into glory. That's what he's done with our death. So it's not what I expect. Oh, I thought it was this horror, and it's not. It's him. Okay. And the last sense, death is not what I expect. It speaks of the secret hope in every person's heart, I would imagine, and certainly the hope of Christian life, which is death, the finality, the horror, the tragedy is not what I expect. On a different level of experience, I expect something different. I am looking for something different. We look forward to the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. And that is poem 1. Poem 2 of our Easter poem series. I can start off reading it and then I'll explain it. My fear of you, so ever present, has been replaced by love, by you, so much that I discount it when it comes as so much weakness, and I hold as little against myself as you. So this is a poem prayer, if you want to call it that. It's directed to God, and it's speaking of what God does in a person gradually, often gradually. My fear of you. And I think that probably most, I'll wager, I could be wrong about that, but many, at least many people, have some kind of a fear of God, fear that he's looking to punish, looking that he'll find something lacking, that you haven't done a good enough job, that you haven't evangelized well enough, that you haven't preached the gospel well enough, that you missed an opportunity. You could have said something to this person and you didn't. Oh, they were doing something wrong and you didn't correct them. And that God is kind of holding an account, or that you'll miss the train on his blessings, and if only you had been more loving, if only you had been more observant, more sensitive to the movement of the Holy Spirit, then you would have had this thing and now you've missed it, now you don't have it. There are many ways of being afraid of God, being afraid of punishment, being afraid of his displeasure. So my fear of you, so ever present, has been replaced by love, by you. And that has a double meaning, replaced by love, by you. So meaning, God, you're the one that replaced it for me. You took out the old thing and you put in the new thing. And it means the new thing is yourself. By love, by you, replaced by you, God, yourself. So much that I discount it when it comes, it being my fear. I discount my fear when it comes. So this is an interesting thing. At first, you hear how fear has been replaced by love, but the person is not really concerned when fear comes back. It's an admission of the human condition. We're not going to get it right. We're not going to always be thinking the right things about God. And what this is saying is that anxiety doesn't come anymore. That anxiety about thinking and feeling the right way about God, having the right disposition, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. So when the fear comes, I discount it when it comes, says the line, as so much weakness. It's just weakness. It's just human weakness. And God knows all about human weakness. It doesn't bother him. None of it bothers him. That I discount it when it comes as so much weakness, and I hold as little against myself as you. That line also has a double meaning. I hold as little against myself as you. So I hold as little against myself as you do. You don't hold anything against me, and so I don't hold anything against me. But it also means I hold as little against myself as I hold against you. I think, and again, this isn't true for everyone, I'm sure, but many people hold something against God. Whether they are aware of that or not, people are perhaps afraid to admit it. Some people are blessedly honest and they're able to talk about how they resent God for this or that. And other people are afraid of having that feeling. And they keep it in, and they don't necessarily even know, in some cases, that they're upset with God for either putting them in a certain position, or for not letting this or that happen, or for not answering this or that prayer, seemingly. And what the line in the poem means, and I hold as little against myself as you. I'm not blaming myself, and I'm not blaming God, and I'm just here, as myself, in my weakness, in my not seeing things clearly, in my not getting it right. I'm just here, and I'm not upset with God, and I'm not upset with myself. I'm just here, and that is the best place that anybody can be. It's the only place that anybody can authentically be with God. And it's the way we are anyway, with all of our fear and anxiety. We're okay. He's okay. We're okay together. That's poem 2. Easter poem number 3. This is a short one. God rewarded sin with Christ to turn the first lie on its head and make it true. So, what is the first lie? What is it that the serpent said in the garden? The serpent said to Eve, have you really been told not to eat any of the trees in the garden? And Eve said, no, it's not all of them. It's just this one, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Because God says that if we eat of it, we'll die. And the serpent said, oh, you won't die. You'll become like God. And that lie, you'll become like God, knowing good from evil, is what caused the first parents to not trust God. And it doesn't imply that the story is literal. Poems don't necessarily need to assume literal or figurative. In any case, it's how the Genesis story goes. And so this first lie, you'll be like God. You'll be like God. Really, they were going to be dying if they ate it. He's saying, no, if you eat it, you'll be like God. So what is God's response to sin, which is the taking of that fruit, whatever it symbolizes, against what God had said when he had told them, if you do this, you will die. It's just the way it is. They did it. They died. But then the first line of the poem is, God rewarded sin with Christ. And what is it that Jesus comes to do? He comes to be like us, like human beings, to unite the two natures, the human and the divine, so that human nature can be divinized. This is more of a concept in the Orthodox Church, divinization, deification. But the divinization of human nature is one of the key tenets of Christianity, has been for most of history. And in doing that, Jesus turns this first lie, you'll be like God, and makes it true. We didn't lose anything. He's able to say to Adam and Eve, hey, you were right. You were right. So, hey, let's go party. That's poem 3. Easter poem 4. He took the cross that I was on, and laid it humbly God upon. His image fearsomely restored, wounded creation, wounded Lord. Now, this is another short poem, but it has a lot in it theologically. The first line, he took the cross that I was on. Now, we really, when we think of the cross, we think of Jesus saying to us, take up your cross and follow me. And then we think of Jesus dying on the cross, and then we think, oh, in order to follow Jesus, we need to take our own cross. Jesus took the cross, and now we need to take our own cross. That really has it a little bit backwards. Why did Jesus go to the cross? It's because that's where we were. We were suffering. We were dying. That's not what he made us for. That's not a reflection of the image of God. When we were originally made, we were not made for suffering or for death. We were immune to that. It doesn't mean that we were not able to grow, able to change. It just meant that it wasn't dangerous here to us. It wasn't something that threatened us. It didn't pose any kind of threat to our destiny to be here. Whereas now, we could die. We could be in the middle of something. It doesn't matter how important it is. We can just die. We can get sick. We can get a disease. We can have an accident. We're not safe here anymore. And is that a reflection of the image of God? Is that how God made us to be? No, it's a horror. It's something that he is infinitely offended by, shall we say, if I can borrow the phrase. He's infinitely offended by that. That's not his image. We're on the cross. Before Christ even comes, figuratively speaking, humanity is on the cross. So when Jesus comes and is incarnated as a human being, that's where he goes to. He comes to us in our suffering. We already have the cross. Nobody is lacking the cross. You can go anywhere. You can ask any person, are you suffering? Have you suffered in any way? And they will say, yes. Yes. There's no shortage of crosses in the world. Jesus came to be on that cross. He came to be with us in our suffering in order to conquer it. Because the wounded image of God, he needed to fix that. He needed to fix that. The image of God is suffering and dying. So what does God do? The next line of the poem, and laid it humbly God upon. Then his image fearsomely restored, wounded creation, wounded Lord. The restoration of the image of God comes through Jesus coming to suffer, to die, suddenly with the image of God again. With the image of God. We who were on the cross, this separated us from God. This fact that we were suffering and dying, this was an aberration. This was an abomination. This was infinitely offensive. And yet now God himself suffering and dying, that changes everything. Suddenly, with the image of God again, we can look at the crucified hands, the marks in his hands, the marks in his feet, the hole in his side. And we can recognize that and say, oh, that's what I look like inside. That's what I look like. I look like God again. And that's what poem 4 means. Easter poem 5. O come thou, Adam, rise and see the fruit that was forbidden thee was born upon another tree. In my nature thou shalt be like unto God eternally. This last poem in the Easter poem series is as if it were Christ speaking to Adam. If you've ever read the Office of Readings on Holy Saturday, it speaks, there's a homily that speaks of Jesus' descent into hell, and he's addressing Adam, and he's addressing Eve, and he's saying to them, I didn't make you for this. I didn't make you for death. I, who was your creator, have become your son in order to get you out. So the poem, O come thou, Adam, rise and see. The fruit that was forbidden thee was born upon another tree. The knowledge of good and evil. Jesus takes into himself this knowledge of evil. He himself is all things good, and he takes to himself all things evil, so that it's all reconciled in him, in this moment on the cross of simultaneous defeat and triumph, where everything is changed. All of reality is inverted at that point. And he can say to Adam then, it's not a problem anymore. It's not a problem anymore. It's not a problem anymore. You plucked that fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And yes, you understood good and evil. You understood evil for the first time because evil happened to you. It happened to you. You began to suffer. You began to die. You and everybody else in the whole world began to suffer and die from being separated from God, from me, as the poem would say, written from the perspective of Christ. But now, this fruit, this knowledge of good and evil, has been born upon another tree, the cross. And it's no longer forbidden. It's been taken up by God himself. And the next line, in my nature thou shalt be like unto God eternally. Jesus took on a human nature. He was fully human, fully divine. And what was the first lie of the serpent? We addressed this back in poem 3. You will be like God. So here we have Jesus fulfilling his own promise and saying, in my nature, through what I've done, my human nature united to my divine nature, I will unite your human nature to my divine nature. And you will be like unto God eternally. It's all about what Jesus has done to make it so we don't have anything to fear anymore in terms of suffering and death and what it means. It doesn't mean what it would have meant. It doesn't mean that we're diminished. It doesn't mean that we somehow lack something, that we lack what we need. Though we do here, all of the things that we suffer mean exactly what Jesus' life meant, exactly what they meant in his life, because our natures are united. Human nature has been united in the person of Christ to the divine nature. And what God has joined, let no man put asunder. And those are the Easter poems. Thank you for listening.